particularly early on in the comics, is incredibly stupid. If he saw this table in front of him, he'd say, "Table, don't like table," and he'd smash it, because Hulk smashes. That's what he does, he smashes, you know. And the villain in the Hulk is called the Leader. The Leader is the villain. And the Leader is all brain. Indeed, the Leader has such a long head that he's almost in danger of falling over because of the size of his brain. So he has to wear, like children have to wear a steel brace on their teeth, the Leader wears a steel brace on his head because he's too bright. So the Leader, notice the Leader's a slightly quasi-fascistic, right-wing, elitist figure, isn't he? The man who wants to dominate through his mind is counterposed by just brute force, the Hulk. And this idea that there's a force for good and a force for evil, and the one always supplants the other, but the one can never defeat the other. Because the Leader in the Hulk, the Owl in Daredevil, the Joker in Batman, Doctor Doom in the Fantastic Four, Dr. Octopus in the Green Goblin, another green one, comes back in Spider-Man, they never destroy. If one of them's destroyed, their son finds their mask in a trunk and puts it on and knows that he wants to dominate the world, right? And comes back again, because they can never be destroyed, because they're archetypes. But comics hint at a sort of pagan non-dualism, partly because they insist upon this good and evil trajectory so much. And that's in some ways when they become quite morally complicated and quite dangerous. In Greek tragedy, a moral system exists, but it's preordained, but you have the fate partly in your own hands, even though it's decided by the gods. In the Oresteia, by Aeschylus, you have a tragedy in a family, cannibalism, destruction, self-devouring, which is revenged and passed through into future generations. So that the Greek fleet can get to Troy, a girl, Iphigenia, is sacrificed. Clytemnestra avenges herself as a Medusa, as a Gorgon, against her husband who's killed her own daughter. And then, of course, there's a cycle of revenge and pity in the absence of pity, when the son, Orestes, who identifies with the father, comes back. In this type of culture, of obviously a much higher level conceptually, it's noticeable that the good character and the evil character are alive, are differentiated, merge in, replace one another, and separate over the three plays in that particular trilogy. If you look at real life, and you consider any conflict between men, Northern Ireland in the 1970s, we're British here, many people here are British nationalists. But if you notice, the IRA guerrilla, terrorist paramilitary, the loyalist guerrilla, terrorist paramilitary. One of my grandfathers was in the Ulster Volunteer Force at the beginning of the 20th century, but I went to a Catholic school. And Nietzsche has a concept called perspectivalism, whereby certain sides choose you in life. Certain things are prior ordained. When the US Marine fights the Islamist radical in Fallujah, say, the iconography of an American comic begins to collapse. Because which is the good one and which is the evil one? The average middle American, as he's sat reading Captain America, you know, and zapping the channels, thinks that the Marine is the good one, you know, with the 30 attention sort of attention span. But at the same time, the Marine isn't an incarnation of evil. He's a man fighting for what he's been told to fight for. He's a warrior, there's flies in his eyes, he's covered in sweat, he's going to kill someone who opposes him. But the radical on the other side is the same. And he sees that he's fighting for his people and the destiny of his faith. And when warriors fight each other, often there's little hatred left afterwards because it's expended in the extraordinary ferocity of the moment. And this is when this type of mass culture, amusing and interesting and entertaining though it is, begins to fall away. Because whenever we've gone to war, and we've gone quite a lot over the last 10 to 12 years, Blair's wars as well in Kosovo, there's the bombing of the Serbs, Milosevic is depicted as evil. Remember those slogans in the Sun? Bomb Milosevic's bed, bomb his bed, bomb his house, you know, and this sort of thing. Saddam, you know, we're going to string him up, you know. The man's a war criminal. The fact he's been applying to the West for years, you know, didn't seem to come into it. Hanged, showed extreme bravery in a way, even though, if you weren't a Sunni in Iraq, definitely, he wasn't exactly your man. But there is a degree to which the extraordinary demonisation of the other, which works. That's why it's used. The British National Party won 2 seats in that election, but there was a campaign against it for 12 to 15 days before in almost every item of media, irrespective of ideological profile, saying don't vote for these people. To get rid of the softer protest votes, you're only left with the hardcore. That's what it's used. That's why that type of ideology is used. Maybe humans are hardwired to see absolute malevolence as on the other side, when in actual fact it's just a person who may or may not be fighting against them. But what this type of mass and popular culture does is it retains the instinct of the heroic, to transcend, to fight, to struggle, to not know fear, to, if one has fear, to overcome it in the moment, to be part of a group, but to retain individual consciousness within it, to be male, to be biologically defined, to not be frightened of death. Whatever religious or spiritual views and values that one incarnates in order to face that. These are, in a crude way, what these forms are suggesting. Morality is often instinctual, as is largely true with humans. I knew somebody who fought in Korea. When they were captured, the Koreans debated amongst themselves whether they should kill all the prisoners. And there were savage disputes between men. This always happens in war. I remember, as I near the close of this speech, that one of Sir Oswald Mosley's sons wrote a very interesting book, both about his father and about his experiences in the Second War. This is Nicholas Mosley, the novelist and biographer. And he was in the paratroop regiment. And there's 2 stories that impinge upon the nature of the heroic that often appears in popular forms, and which I'll close with. One is when he was with his other members, he was with his other parachutists, and they were in a room, and the Daily Mirror, still going, the Daily Mirror, the organ of left-wing hate, which is the Daily Mirror, and on the front it said Oswald Mosley, who was then, I believe, being released from prison. The most hated man in Britain, he said, the most hated man in Britain. And the chap looked up from his desk, a sort of desk army wallow, you know, and looked at Mosley, who was leading a fighting brigade, and said, Mosley? He said, you're not related to this bastard, are you? And he said, I don't know if he's the eldest or the second son, but he said, I'm one of his sons. And total silence in the room. Total silence in the room. And they stared each other out, and the bloke's hands gripped the mirror. And all the other paratroopers were looking at this incident. And after about 4 minutes, it broke, and the other one tore up the mirror and put it in a bin at the back of the desk and said, sorry, mate. Didn't mean anything. Really? I didn't mean anything. And Moti said, well, that's all right then, old chap, isn't it? You know. And left. And the other story is very, very interesting. And this is they're advancing through France, and the Germans are falling back. And I believe I told this story before at one of these meetings, but never waste a good story. And a senior officer comes down the track and says, Mosley! He says, Mosley, you're taking too many prisoners, Mosley. You're taking too many prisoners. It's slowing the advance. Do you understand what I'm saying, Mosley? And he said, certainly, sir, yes, I totally understand what you're saying. He said, do you really understand what I'm saying? You're slowing the advance. Everyone's noticing it. Do something about it. Do you understand? Sir? And he's off to address another officer, you know, further down. And Mosley turns to his Welsh sergeant major and says, what do you think about that? What are you saying? We're taking too many prisoners. Because, of course, what the officer has told him in a very English and in a very British way is to shoot German soldiers and to shoot German prisoners and to shoot them in ditches. What else does it mean? You're slowing the advance. You're taking too many prisoners. You're not soft on these people, are you, Mosley? Speed the advance of your column. That's what he's saying, but it's not written down. It's not given as a formal and codified order. But everyone shoots prisoners in war. It's a fact. When your friend's had his head blown off next to you, you want revenge. I know people who fought in the Falklands. And some of the Argentinian Special Forces and some of the conscripts together used dum-dum bullets. Hits a man, his spine explodes. So when certain conscripts were found by British troops, they finished them pretty quickly at Goose Green and elsewhere. This will occur in all wars amongst all men, of all races and of all kinds, because it's part of the fury that battle involves. One of my views is that we can't, as a species and even as groups, really face the fact that in situations of extremity, this is what we're like. And this is why, in some ways, we create for our entertainment these striated forms of heroic culture where there's absolutely good and absolutely malevolent, and the two never cross over.